Okay, so what we're going to do now, guys, really exciting. We've got a real paleontologist waiting to talk to us. His name is Benjamin, and I want to say hello, Benjamin. How are you doing today?
Hello, I'm
It's
doing great.
good. It's really good to see you. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. I know time is the most valuable asset any of us have, and we really appreciate your time for being here. So thank you for that.
Well, thanks for inviting me. This is a pleasure to have a conversation with you today and talk about paleontology and dinosaurs.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, that's what we love. So, first question I have: so tell us about your current job and what does it entail? What do you actually do?
Yeah, so I'm a professor. I'm an associate professor at Utah State University in their Uinta Basin campus, which is located just about I don't know about 15 minutes from Dinosaur National Monument. Um, I uh, I teach basically college students. Last night, I finished up teaching a class I teach on dinosaurs called the Natural History of Dinosaurs. I also teach a lot of freshman college students various courses in science and geology. So I teach not only about dinosaurs, but I also teach about other extinct animals, both invertebrates and vertebrates. And I also teach students about the rocks that dinosaurs are found in, and also explore classes on like paleoclimate and understanding the environment that not only dinosaurs lived in, but other creatures at other geological times in the past. And so my typical day is a lot of preparing lectures, teaching, reading scientific papers, um, basically putting together classes. And now I've been teaching a lot of online classes and kind of broadcast classes as well, kind of similar to this. So, so I'm always, and I got students distributed across the state of Utah. So I have students in down in Moab. Our main campus is in Logan, and I teach here in Vernal. So, and many of those areas have fantastic deposits of dinosaurs and prehistoric creatures. And our university is really cool in that we have a museum on one of our campus in Price, the Prehistoric Museum, that's in Price, Utah. It's a fantastic dinosaur museum. I also work with people at the Utah Fieldhouse Museum, which is here in Vernal, which is another fantastic dinosaur collection. So if you're in Utah, those are two, especially Eastern Utah, those are two really fun museums to visit,
And
especially if
they're
you're interested in
and
dinosaurs.
they're open to the public, so the public can come and see those.
Yeah, and they're both run by the state, one by the university and one by the state government as a state museum. And they feature quite a few cool dinosaurs. The one in Price has a fabulous collection of ankylosaurs and on display, as well as some really nice Allosaur, Stegosaurus, some of the Morrison formation dinosaurs. And the one in Vernal has a beautiful display. It's got an Allosaurus, Hapacanthosaurus, Stegosaurus, and then Dippy the Diplodocus. They have a cast of it that was one of the ones that Andrew Carnegie made back in the day that was found in Dinosaur National Monument.
That,
And if you are into dinosaurs, you have to visit Dinosaur National Monument. This is the place to be in terms of incredible bones that are still in the rock. It's a site that's been excavated beginning in 1909, and it's a really cool bone bed. And it's open to the public, and it's a really cool place to explore. I dragged my parents to go see it when I was 9 years old, and many of the students that I teach got inspired by going to Dinosaur National Monument as kids and getting interested in paleontology. Yeah.
amazing. So tell me about. You said the Dinosaur National Monument. That's like a rock formation you can go to and see them actually in the rock. Is that right?
Yeah, this is a site that it's located close to the Colorado border, kind of in the corner of Utah. And it was discovered by a fellow named Earl Douglas. Earl Douglas was hired by Andrew Carnegie back in the early 1900s to go west and find dinosaurs. And Carnegie was setting up a museum in Pittsburgh, and he wanted dinosaurs. And at that time, all the dinosaurs were either at the Peabody Museum or at the American Museum in New York or down in Philadelphia. And he wanted to put some dinosaurs on display. And he sent Earl Douglas out west. And Earl Douglas came out to this part of Utah, which at that time there weren't any dinosaurs that had been discovered yet. And he went up a kind of a little ravine and started discovered a bunch of sauropod vertebrae that were dipping down into the ground. And there's a famous picture of him standing next to it. And so they started excavating it. And initially, they put in a mining claim to excavate the dinosaur bones, but the government's like, these are dinosaurs. We should open this up, try to make it into some sort of park or some sort of national monument, which is what ended up happening. So they started working on it in 1909. And the Carnegie Museum, I think, worked on it until about the 1930s. And then during the Great Depression, the United States government actually hired people to come out and help dig up dinosaurs for pay during the Great Depression. And it was during that time when they had a lot of people, a lot of workers that were out of work to help with the excavation, that they actually excavated quite a bit more of the hillside. And they were pulling out all of these amazing dinosaurs: Diplodocus, Apatosaurus, Camarasaurus. They found some Allosaurus specimens up there, Stegosaurus, all these classic kind of iconic Jurassic dinosaurs. And many of them ended up getting distributed to various museums around the world. And they'd make casts of them, or they would actually send certain dinosaurs. So if you ever in Denver, their big sauropod dinosaurs from Dinosaur National Monument. Dippy the Diplodocus, which was on display in London,
Yes.
came from that locality. And so it's a really cool place. And so eventually they decided to leave some of the bones in the rock so that people could come and see how they were collected. And so they quit working on that rock face. But what's interesting about it is that they kind of quit there, but then they started finding dinosaurs up along that ridge too. So they've had a number of interesting discoveries that have been made along that whole area. And if you go, there is a quarry that you can go up to. There's a visitor center. You can take a little tram or drive up to the quarry itself, which is kind of enclosed now to help protect it from the weathering. But there's a wonderful trail that you can take called the Discovery Trail. And it's kind of hidden, but if you're up there, if you go on that little trail, on the opposite side is another ridge that's filled with dinosaur bones that they haven't even excavated yet. So if they want, they could excavate more if they ever wanted to, and pull out more dinosaurs. So they haven't right now, but there is a possibility in the future, and it's fun to go over on that side because you can see how the bone really looked like before you start excavating. So you can see if you can see the bones. They mark a couple of them so visitors can see them, but it's really cool. So yeah,
because I can imagine as an untrained eye, it's kind of hard to spot what you're looking for. Once you've been doing it for a while, I'm sure you know what to look for. So for general public, that's a fantastic sort of insight into what real paleontology is all about.
Yeah, definitely. And the bones are disarticulated. They're all split apart.
Okay.
So when you go there, you look at these bones and you go, okay, what bone is that? Which dinosaur did it belong to? They have a little key there that you could figure out. Now, that's what I do with my students. I take them up and I say, okay, you have to find all the bones for this dinosaur and this dinosaur and this dinosaur and mark which ones are present on the rock.
Gotcha.
Because they're all disarticulated. There have been a few articulated skeletons that have been found there. The most famous one, I think, is the Camarasaurus. That's they have a cast there, but they're actual specimens in Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And it's a juvenile sauropod dinosaur that was, I think there was only one bone that was kind of out of place, but it's a almost completely articulated skeleton. They did find an Allosaurus a few years back. The funny thing about the Allosaurus is it's articulated and they were working on it, and they got up to the head, and they couldn't find the head,
Oh no.
the skull. So they were all kind of bummed out, but they kept kind of working a little bit further into the rock. And this rock is hard, really hard rock. So it's tough to prepare. And they got about, I don't know, about a meter away from the rest of the skeleton, and they found the skull.
Oh wow.
So they did find it, and so they were able to to pull it out. So when an animal dies, of course, it starts to disarticulate. The bones will start to disarticulate and move along. And this is an ancient river bed, so a lot of these bones, the animals had died upstream, up the river, and they died, and they started to decay. The bones scattered apart, and then they were drifted down and got buried.
So actually
So
finding the skull, that's because from my understanding, the skulls are pretty rare. They're the hardest things to find on fossils, aren't they? So,
yeah,
and he actually found that the skull. That's incredible. That's oh man, you made me. That's on the bucket list now. I've got to come now. I've got to come and find it, come and see it, and visit it. So that's all stuff that we can see in the field. What about yourself? Do you ever work in the field? Is that something you've done, or do you do
yeah,
regularly?
yeah. So I'll give you a little bit background about my experiences,
Hmm.
some of the career paths in paleontology. Um, so prior to being a professor, I worked as a paleontology consultant, where I spend almost all my time in the field. Nowadays, I usually go out and do collections in the summertime. I've been working on a variety of different projects and with different other scientists, including geologists, chemists, various other people, biologists who work kind of in other fields. And I've worked a lot in this tri state area of Utah, Colorado, and Southwest Wyoming. And a lot of my students work in the Jurassic or Cretaceous periods. I've been working a little bit down in the Triassic, and I've been also working in the Cenozoic, in the time period after the extinction of the dinosaurs,
Okay.
the Paleocene and the Eocene as well. So looking for uh, in the Cenozoic, I look for a lot of extinct mammals that survived the extinction event, um, which I find kind of fun and interesting. The one nice thing about working with mammals is that they're much smaller, and so one
Okay.
of the challenges of dinosaurs is when you find them, they get they're pretty enormous, and so it takes a lot of time and heavy equipment to excavate a dinosaur. So for a sauropod dinosaur, it could be like 5 or 6 years before you get it out of the ground, and it's constant work arranging for heavy equipment and stuff to come in and work on that. So prior to being a professor, I worked in the field as a consultant. What a consultant does is um, I would get called out on projects that they were building, say a road or a big pipeline. A lot of times they did a lot of road work. So they're building a highway or expanding a highway, and they're going through like dinosaur bearing rocks, or they're going through something in which there's the chance of finding really cool fossils. And so they'll have a paleontologist go out and kind of assess whether they'll find a dinosaur or not. And if there is a chance, then you go out on the crew, the construction crew. And that way, if they uncover, and sometimes they do, they found a sauropod here not too long ago on a pipeline project. So if they uncover something, then you're there to like salvage it and try to get it all cleaned up and prepped and then into a museum so people can study it and come and see it.
I can
Uh,
imagine the pressure on that because they're building a pipeline or whatever it is they want to get done, but all of a sudden they hit something that's really important. Is there, like you've got 2 days to get this out, or does the whole thing stop, or how does it work?
yeah, it's kind of interesting because a lot of times what ends up happening is it depends. Sometimes they'll hit something really amazing and they'll be like, all right, can you go around this and we can work on this while you work on that? A lot of times what ends up happening is that you are working with like the rubble of the stuff that they've dug through,
Okay.
and you pick up something. And and you look down and it's an amazing fossil. I've seen machines that will be going along, the countryside, and it's kicking up all the dirt and everything, and all of a sudden you'll see a bunch of pile of bones, and you're like, wait, we ran into something. Um, there's a famous specimen at Dinosaur National Monument. In the old days, they would use dynamite to blow up stuff,
Oh wow.
and there was a kid that was up there to see the big explosion as they were detonating the dynamite into the hillside. And after they had cleared off the area, he came running in and he looked down, and one of the blocks that they had blown off had this amazing little. It looks like a little lizard with all these weird little scales. It's a relative to it's an archosaur relative to crocodiles that live today, and it's little. It's a little specimen that they have on display. You can get a little cast at the visitor center that he found
Wow.
it, that they prepped it up, and it's really an incredible thing. And he just had really sharp eyes. I mean, kids are fantastic at finding fossils because they're down close to the ground. You're looking around. They're able to pick up things and look at things. And so often, many really incredible dinosaur discoveries have been made by kids. So
That's amazing. And we did a show yesterday on Mary Anning, and she was 11 when she discovered a lot of her fossils and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a I don't know what it. Well, I do know what it is with dinosaurs. I think with kids and dinosaurs, it's very much the case that the kids love the fact that these things were real. You can like unicorns and you can like dragons and they're cool, but dinosaurs were here. They're actually real things that were around, and that I think that's the main attraction for people like myself, and I'm sure it's one of the things that kids love as well, is the fact that these things were here and with us.
yeah, it's kind of weird too. The thing that attracted me, I think, the most about paleontology, um, when I was a kid, I grew up in the Rocky Mountains, and um, when I was about, I don't know, really young, I found a fossil shell of a Cretaceous marine little bivalve, a little clam. And I remember showing it, I think probably to my mom, and she's like, "Oh, that's a fossil shell that listed in oceans here." And of course, there's mountains all around
Sure.
me. And I was like, wait a second, how did this whole area be under an ocean back, 100 million years ago? Like, where did these mountains come from? What did the landscape look like? It must have been totally different than it looks like today.
Yeah.
And so that really opened my eye to like the depth of geological time that we stand on.
Uh huh.
So that really got me excited, about learning more about paleontology, learning about dinosaurs, learning about other extinct creatures. Starting to go out and collect. I became an avid rock hound, and going out and collecting fossils and things that I could find. Lots of times I was interested in pretty crystals and things like that. Visit all the rock shops and stuff.
Excellent.
Um, and that really inspired me, I think, in interest in paleontology and figuring out, like, what did the world really look like,
Sure.
100 million years ago, 200 million years ago, 300 million years ago? What were the creatures look like as they were running around? So yeah, so that's really fun. The other thing I love about paleontology is that it's a detective story. You are solving a mystery, and sometimes the mystery takes you into dead ends, and sometimes it's not. It's really addictive in terms of, like, you might have just a scrap of bone, or you might be trying to track down an old fossil locality that someone discovered 100 years ago, and you're looking at all these clues, trying to figure out all these things, and oftentimes the clues you're given are tantalizingly, like, very small. So um, last night I was talking to my students, and I was showing them some bones. They had to identify some bones, right? And a lot of the bones that you find are really fragmentary, and they were all like, how much of a dinosaur do you need? I mean, these things are like, you're showing us this fragments of these bones and stuff. We can't even tell where it belongs in a dinosaur. So how do you know? And I said, well, a lot of it's just spending a lot of time looking at the skeletons of these animals, looking in the museum, hunting around in old museum collections, looking at old labels, looking at all this information, and tracking down what that bone really represents. And sometimes a lot of times you're making guesses in terms of like what it could be, and then you go back and you try to find where it was found and look for more, because every time you discover a new fossil, you add a new piece to the puzzle. So it's kind of addictive. It is a detective story. You're trying to figure out like what were the creatures living there, what was going on, and that to me is really fun. It's like being a Sherlock Holmes sort of character. And
Yeah, I can imagine, because you're making your own story around, or trying to find the story of what it is you've found. It's amazing. So, of all the things you've done and seen and found, is there anything that you can particularly remember that excites you? Any great stories that you want to tell us?
let's see. Yeah, so I've made some really fun discoveries over the years, and one of the fun stuff is kind of like the when you find something that hasn't been found before. So a lot of times you'll be out doing field work, um, and I got this last summer we found a really cool little skeleton of a creature, and at first I thought it might be something, so I was kind of excited. We started prepping it up, and it ended up being something else. And the funny thing about this specimen I've been prepping, I call it the ball of bones, because I was hoping it was an articulated skeleton. And what it is it's a mammal. It's a little mammal. And when we found it on the outcrop eroding out, I found some postcranius or elements to it, and a couple of femurs, two femurs, found a tibia. We started finding more and more. And as you work your way into the hillside, and you start getting into the rock itself that hasn't eroded out, you get really excited when you haven't found the skull, right? So you know that the skull's in there. So we chopped into it, and sure enough, we found the top of the skull. So I took it back. I thought it was a creodont. It ended up having started prepping it out and looking at the teeth. I noticed that it has this really interesting character of having the tibia and the fibula fused at the distal end, which is kind of weird. But it's found in a group called the panelestids. And these were like little otter-like mammals that are totally extinct today, unrelated to modern otters. And these guys are kind of related to the cymolestids that were running around during the late Cretaceous. And there's some beautiful skeletons that have been found in the Green River Formation, and so this was kind of unique. They have been found in the area we were working at. So, but there's lots of other skeletons of them that are out there. So a lot of times you're trying to find kind of bits and pieces of a skeleton that people haven't found before, like a new species. And so, so super excited about that specimen. But a couple years ago, we found a jaw of, so it's not a skeleton, it's just a jaw. And we also found a humerus of a weird pig-like creature. And it ended up being a new genus and species of this really archaic family. And it kind of pushed down this idea of the origin of some of these what are called artiodactyls, even-toed ungulate sort of animals a little bit further back in time. So sometimes that's more exciting because no one had found that thing, but it's not as complete as the specimen we're working on downstairs. That's much more complete, but there are other skeletons of it.
Gotcha.
So sometimes you'll find something like, an Allosaurus or something, and you find just a part of it and you get really excited, but then you kind of get back to the museum and they're like, oh, they have a lot of Allosaurus specimens here, try to fit it in. So, yeah, recently, this last week, I've also been working on a really interesting dinosaur discovery, and I've been trying to kind of track down it. And what spurred me to get interested in this was a colleague of mine has been working in over in Colorado, and she was working on the geology of this camp that she works at. And she emailed me and she said, do you have any interesting stuff about it? And I said, well, I do. There's this dinosaur discovery that was made over there. And I've been really puzzled about where it was found. And it was found in 1869. In fact, it was the first dinosaur that was discovered in Colorado. and it's a really fragmentary bone, and it was sent back east and presented to Joseph Leidy, who was the first vertebrate paleontologist. He's famous for working on Hadrosaurus and some of the New Jersey dinosaurs, and later kind of got involved in a lot of these fossils to describe they were coming from the American West as these surveyors were working. And Joseph Leidy recognizes a dinosaur. And this is pretty early on in the history of paleontology. And he gave it a new genus and species name, Anthrodermis, which we don't use today. And I'll tell you why, because it's a
Okay.
really fragmentary fossil. It's only like a part of a bone of a caulovertebrae. And in fact, Richard Owen, the guy who coined the term Dinosauria, I found a quote of his that basically said, "What are you thinking, Joseph Leidy? Why are you naming this a new species? It's just a fragment of a bone. There's nothing diagnostic of this thing." And it's in this Smithsonian collection. Years later, in 1920, the curator of dinosaurs, Charles Gilmore, worked on it, and he's like, "Yeah, I think it's an Allosaurus. I think it's an Allosaurus tail, or the tail of an Allosaurus." And so people have just kind of discounted it. What the interesting thing is that no other dinosaurs have been found in that area since that discovery. So I've always wondered if where it came from,
Mhm.
if it might have come from the Cretaceous or the Jurassic, where, because it was supposedly given to Ferdinand Hayden, who was a surveyor who came over then. And so I've been tracking down the archives of trying to figure out who was the person that gave him the bone and where did they collect it from.
Sure.
And so I'm going down a lot of leads, looking at some of these archival newspapers, government reports. The surveys would make maps, going through some of the archives with the old lands grant. So when people would actually go out and do land surveys of the area, um, looking at all of their records to try to track down where the specimen might have actually come from. So there's a lot of detective work involved in that, and the idea is that we could go back there and find some dinosaur bones and figure out exactly where this specimen came from. If one bone came from that
Yes.
area, there's probably more in the
That's
ground.
right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's like you were saying, that's the detective part of it. Not only are you trying to find out what kind of animal or what kind of dinosaur it was, what prehistoric creature it was, you got to find out where it was from, who discovered it, when it was discovered, all that sort of thing. You know, that's such a mystery. And there's little clues everywhere, I imagine, and you got to just got to find those.
yeah,
That's
and sometimes, yeah, there's another funny story. I was working up in Wyoming, and there was a old scientific paper that I had where a fossil locality was. I was trying to find in the middle of nowhere, and all I had to go on was a picture that was taken of the locality. So
oh,
we
well,
were out there, like with a picture, trying to match up all the hillsides, to see where it was. And the funny thing was that we were wandering around. We could not find where this fossil locality was. And somebody on the crew had left their jacket out when we got back to camp. And I said, "I know where that is. I'm going to run and get it." So I ran and got their jacket where we had stopped for lunch. And I was running back, and I decided to take a different route and just a quicker route back to camp. And I'm running along, and I look over, and I'm like, "Oh, that's the hillside." And I grabbed the piece of paper with the photograph on it and matched it up. And I'm like looking down. I'm like, "This is it. We found it." And I came running back into camp, and I was like, "We found it. We found it." And luckily, they had actually taken a stake and they had put a stake down on the ground where the locality was. So I knew it was the locality because they had a stake that was there, and it matched up perfectly. And we started finding fossils too. So a lot of it detective work, yeah, for sure.
it's like it's almost Indiana Jones, isn't it? It's like that
Yeah,
sort of thing. It's like if you saw it in a movie, you'd be like, no, that would never happen. But it's for real. That's
yeah,
so cool. So I know there's lots of children watching. Hundreds, stroke thousands of children are really interested in paleontology, and they've got their interest in dinosaurs. So what I wanted to ask you, one of the main things that I am always thinking about is what's the career path? From a young child to becoming someone like yourself. What's the career path to become a paleontologist?
yeah. So there's lots of different career paths. to become a professional paleontologist. And one of the things that uh, I've kind of experienced in my career path of going through this is just the persistence of being interested in paleontology. Um, Oftentimes, as kids, we're super excited about being a paleontologist and really interested in about studying dinosaurs and learning as much as we can about dinosaurs. And that enthusiasm has to remain and keep passionate about it, even as you get into high school, and then eventually when you go to college. And oftentimes in high school and college is uh, when kids get kind of less enthusiastic about paleontology. So you have to keep that enthusiasm. And that's the key thing. So as a kid, read as much as you can about dinosaurs, visit museums, um, go out and explore yourself. I furnace I fed my furnace of interest in paleontology by like reading as much as I can about fossils, visiting museums. I love museums and seeing dinosaurs on display. Dragging my parents out into the field to to take me to look at various rocks. Whenever we go on a trip, stop and look at the geology, and that really made me passionate about it. When I got to college, when you go off to college to become a paleontologist, which is typically necessary, you want to find a college that has a paleontologist that's there on teaching. So and not all universities do. So when you're applying to school to a college, look to see if they have a paleontologist, and that's what I ended up doing. A lot of my parents were like, "You should go here, you should go there," and I'd go walk up and say, do you teach paleontology? And they'd be like, no. I'm like, no, I'm not going there. So, um, so that's, I went to the University of Colorado, and I got there a little bummed out because I had to take all these these classes that I didn't think were related to paleontology. I had to take chemistry and physics and biology. And now, as I realize that stuff is really important. Uh, Chemistry, biology, and physics are really important for paleontology as well as geology itself. So you take basically the four main sciences, you take as many classes as you can. And so I was taking a lot of chemistry, um, getting through a lot of physics, biology, a lot of biology classes, and a lot of geology classes. So studying things like mineralogy, ecology, mammalogy, herpetology, all the ologies, right? And then then I was also taking paleontology. The next thing I did that I highly recommend is I started volunteering at the museum. I worked as a docent, which is like taking kids on tours around the museum, which you learn a lot about dinosaurs because the kids, every kid knows a lot more than you think you know. So even at that age, I was like, wow, the kids are sharp. So they keep me on my toes. I also worked in the collections, and I kind of proved to my professors that I was really into this, and so they invited me out to do some field work, and so I started doing field work with them, and fell in love with field work and being out in the field. Um, and then after I graduated, my career went in kind of a slightly different direction. I realized when I graduated that I wanted to learn more about anatomy. And I felt like, yeah, it's taking all these geology classes, chemistry classes, and stuff, but I wanted to know anatomy really well. And so I went to graduate school to work with an anatomist in an anatomy program. And the uh, the professor I was working with worked on dinosaurs and did paleontology, but he also taught at a dental school in a medical program. And so, which is weird. It sounds weird, but one of the career trajectories of people interested in paleontology, especially dinosaurs, is to work as an anatomist. Richard Owen, who came up with the term Dinosauria, was a professor of surgery in London. So Joseph Leidy was a professor of anatomy at the University of Pennsylvania. And so there's a long history of paleontologists working, teaching anatomy, both to surgeons and to medical doctors. And there's a reason for that, because a lot of the biology that's taught nowadays is all about um, DNA and molecular and cellular biology, the really small, microbial sort of stuff of biology. And paleontologists are really good at figuring out that bone belongs to this bone and where it fits in the skeleton, right?
Sure.
So they often seek out to be trained in anatomy. So I got a degree in anatomy. um, I didn't like that sort of like, because it's pretty gooey. You're working on dissections. We would dissect crocodiles and dissect humans and dissect other animals. So in the cadaver lab, we were working on all sorts of stuff. You're looking at like how the muscles fit onto the bones, all of that sort of stuff, and working alongside a lot of people who are going to be surgeons or going to be medical doctors.
Gotcha.
And then in the summers, we would go out and do field work. So, uh, and so a lot of people would keep that as a career. And I have many friends that work in the medical field at teaching anatomy, and then in the summers they go out and do field work. And so they'll teach like limb bones or limb anatomy, or they may be interested in skull anatomy. And then in the summer, they'll go out and dig up dinosaurs and stuff. And that's very common. That's another career path that a lot of people go down in paleontology. After I got that degree, I came out west and I got my PhD actually back in geology, which I kind of like. I'm more of a rock person than a gooey anatomy person, so I felt a little bit more comfortable in working with rocks. When I graduated, I ended up working as a consultant. I said, so another career path for a lot of people, especially the people that are interested in rocks, is to become a paleontology consultant. And that career path is slightly different. Usually, it doesn't require a PhD; just requires maybe a master's degree, which allows you to get a lot of permits with the government. Um, you can also work with the government too, like the BLM or the Forest Service, or with the National Park Service. And all of those types of land management jobs is where you're going out in the field and you're finding dinosaurs, documenting them, writing up reports about their conservation, salvaging stuff when they're doing a highway project, something like that. And so kind of keeping a record. Oftentimes you're working with they'll do like a land survey, and they want to know, where are the dinosaurs, where are we going to find dinosaurs in this area, where do we need to be watching out for different things. And so you need a lot of reports and stuff, and that's a different career path. A lot of the my students that go into that sort of career path will take classes on how to make maps. So they get a certificate in GIS, which is Geographic Information System. So map making, localities, managing the land, being able to track down the different rock layers and where you're going to find dinosaurs and where you're not going to find dinosaurs, and that sort of work. And that involves a lot of travel too. So you might be traveling up to Montana. The next week you're traveling down, to Nebraska. So you're traveling a lot
Yeah.
depending on the project,
Sure.
and so you got to learn that geology really well, really fast. So if you like the rock end of things, that's another career path for you.
Sure.
Um, After my master's, I worked for 5 years at a museum, and that's a third track way you can go as a paleontologist. Actually, working in a museum, and there's kind of three types of jobs in a museum setting. There's a preparator. A preparator is a person that's going to prepare the fossils when they're brought back in the field. And a lot of my students get really fascinated about being a preparator. They tend not to pay very well, and they tend to be geared to someone who's extremely patient because you could be sitting on a block of dinosaur for months, years on end, working on preparing it.
Wow.
And it requires a lot of dedication, a lot of just like going in every day and chipping off a little bit more of the rock. There was a stegosaurus that was pulled out of Garden City, Colorado, when I was young. And Donna Edgard, who worked on prepping that thing, I think she worked 10 years on it. It's a beautiful specimen. and but it took 10 years of prepping,
Yeah.
like, because it's huge. It's a complete skeleton. So it's you have to be dedicated to it. It's fun though. It's a fun work. You do a lot of times you can do fabrication and casting as a preparator. So you'll take the actual specimens and make casts of the bones that can be mounted for a museum. A lot of preparators come with an art background, so they're interested in doing like the artwork associated with it. So there's a lot of artists, which is kind of a separate field than the preparators, but they can do sort of the artwork, the molding, the fabrication, all of that sort of stuff. And there are a few companies out there that help to design and build mounted skeletons of dinosaurs. And that's another career path you can kind of go down into. The other job at a museum that's a kind of a fun job, I think, and that's being a collection manager. And so that person is in charge of the collections of all the dinosaurs. So when the fossils are brought into the museum, they accession them, they keep track of where they are. They write out, usually it's entering stuff into databases, it's taking pictures of them, it's documenting them, keeping track of them. A lot of it involves moving specimens when they have to move a bunch of dinosaurs from one end of the building to the other end, or they're building an addition and they want to move it. They need to move it into the addition. So oftentimes you're moving stuff with dinosaurs. It's often with a forklift as you move these big giant bones around the museum. Um, and so that's a lot. There's a lot of work involved in that. And that's kind of fun, especially if you're less into interacting with people and you kind of want to just sit down and work on stuff.
Hmm.
And you can discover lots of really amazing stuff. I kind of worked as a collection manager at the American Museum, and what I loved about it was that you learn the fossils really well because you're going into the collections and seeing all the bones, and you start learning about all the famous collectors, what they collected, where they were. So it's a really good education
Yeah.
for figuring out things later on. And then the third job is the curator. The curator is like the face of the museum. So they are publishing, they're researching about the dinosaurs, they're publishing papers, they're getting grants to do scientific expeditions, they're traveling, giving talks, they're interacting with the public, representing the museum. Oftentimes, they're even doing the financial sort of end of the museum, trying to keep it afloat with grants, donations, working with various people, visitors. And so there's sort of the more public face
Sure.
of the museum. And a lot of museums have an educator now too that kind of works as like, someone that takes around people in the museum. I have a lot of friends that work as educators who are interacting with the public down in the displays and teaching people about dinosaurs. So, and that brings me to probably my last career path, and that's becoming a professor and teaching at a university. Um, and that's a really rewarding thing because you get to work with students. Oftentimes, you're leading your own expeditions in the summertime, so a lot of times you have your summers off, which is nice. I have many friends that are high school teachers that are paleontologists, and they do field work just as in the same, and they bring out their high school students. So you don't have to be at a college; you can be at a high school, and be interested in paleontology, be able to take people out in the field, and get students, even in high school, interested in paleontology. And there's always a lot of interest of that. So
Sure.
they may teach other classes, they may teach geology or physics and chemistry at the high school level, but it's yeah, they'll if they can swing it, they'll teach paleontology too, which is really cool. So
So
yeah.
as a young child, from what I, like the little bits I got from that stuck with me was be interested in other things like biology and geology and rocks and learn as much about that as you can. Get yourself into museums and volunteer. That was another thing, another way, because truth be told, in this world, it's all about people. It's not about money. It's not about anything else. It's about people. The more people you know, the more connections you have. And so, if you can volunteer and spend time in a museum, the chances are you're going to bump into somebody who knows somebody who can get you in that door, who can show you and help you to become where you want to be, and take you perhaps on one of these things, and go in the mountains and having a look for dinosaurs. So I think that was some gold dust there in that of what to do if you're really interested in dinosaurs. You've got to spread your interest. You've got to get interested in other things, which most children are, to be honest. The most children I speak to that are into dinosaurs also are into rocks and geodes and that sort of thing. So they've got that natural instinct there. And then get into the museums and volunteer and then learn. And then as you get through high school and into college, then you need to be studying where you're going and then what you're going to be studying when you get there. But
Yeah, yeah. That's definitely the track. Yeah, just keep that interest. That's
yes,
the pattern. Like a lot of people, like when they get older, they're like, I'm not interested. I'll do something easier, you know. And so it's keeping that passion,
sure,
and a lot of it's just kind of luck too. Is you keep working on stuff, you'll stumble upon things. Many paleontologists, I'd say about half of the paleontologists out there have day jobs. They have another career, and but they do paleontology on the side.
good.
So they may have a job that pays a little bit better, but then they have their summers free, maybe a school teacher, and then they go out and do field work.
So
And
it's like a hobby. It's like a
yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
it's not their main form of employment, but it's something that they love doing. Like, everybody has something they love doing, and you can turn it into something that's there's a career eventually if you wanted to go that route. So that's
yeah,
fantastic.
definitely. And like I've seen career trajectories where people are really interested in art and they're really good artists and they love drawing dinosaurs and
Yes,
they just keep working at it, working at it, working at it, and they get better and better and better. And pretty soon they get a commission to do like an art mural or something. And they'll get into the paleo community and they'll have their little business card, and people will then be like, oh, I saw that mural is really beautiful. You should hire this person to do this work. And so then they get into the field as, from outside. So a lot of it's networking, a lot of it's meeting people. Paleontology is a pretty small field, and so when you get to know everybody in the field, they will kind of hint at some opportunities that are out there.
sure,
Um, there are a lot of resources nowadays on the internet to kind of track down some paleontologists, and feel free to email or contact a paleontologist you learn about. And you're welcome to visit my website and email me if you have any questions about careers in paleontology. And that's a really good way. So many paleontologists get inspired by contacting paleontologists and being kind of excited when they write you back. And so that connection is really, really powerful. So, when you visit museums, ask about, the researchers, have a conversation with the person that maybe in there prepping a bone or
sure.
something like, and you'll kind of learn. And of course, there's lots of different characters out there, so you have to kind of you'll meet some paleontologists that are kind of stick in the muds,
Yeah,
and you'll get other paleontologists that are super friendly and want to
sure.
chat for hours. So yeah,
Well, I must say thank you so much for being so open and so friendly and encouraging people to contact you. You're not the first person that I wrote to, but you're certainly the person that came back with the most positive attitude. And I've got some other people that I'm going to be speaking to, but it was really, really special for you to come back because, you're giving to these kids that are really, really interested in dinosaurs. And as I said to you, they see someone like you and say, that's what I want to be. And they'll ask me, how do I get there? And I honestly don't know, which is the reason that I wanted you to come on so that you could talk to us and tell us all the ins and outs. And like it's not all Indiana Jones. There is a lot of work involved, but it's like fishing. You can sit there all day, but when you hook that fish, or when you find that bone, or you discover that thing, that's the magic. That's the thing that keeps you coming back. Am I correct?
definitely. And there are, I'll tell, because when I was a kid, my mom was very concerned that I was interested in paleontology, because she's like, there's no jobs in paleontology. And you'll hear this repeated. There are no jobs you cannot make your living looking for dinosaurs. But you can. There are career opportunities in paleontology. And actually we kind of I think we need more paleontologists, because it may be difficult to find a job, but having that interest and that passion, I think, is really important. Especially nowadays, everybody sits on their computers all the time. And
Yeah.
so being able to go out and observe the natural world and make new discoveries, I think, are even more important today. There was an old paleontologist who we used to work at the museum, and he would get mad at people sitting on their computers because you come by and be like, you should be out there in the field finding new fossils. You're not going to find any fossils on a laptop staring at it all day long. And we would all kind of laugh, but he was right. A lot of
Sure.
it's getting out
Sure.
and exploring and stuff. So
Yeah.
so we need more people to get out there and explore and discover new fossils and stuff, so we can learn more. So, and there's amazing discoveries being made every day too, that are out there as well. So
That's something I constantly, when I go to schools and libraries and do little shows with our puppets. They're not real, but we don't tell anyone that. I'm constantly, the kids are, and the parents are surprised when I say, look, we don't know all the dinosaurs. We're discovering roughly one a week at the moment. You know, it's like we're constantly. So when you guys grow up, you could be the person. You could be the one that goes out there and finds the new dinosaurs and name it and do all that sort of thing. And you can see the eyes in the kids widen up, and they're like, wow, they can really see it happening. You know,
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah. And there's amazing discoveries that are made by kids too, going out into the field as well. Um, and so there is definitely the possibility of finding something if you keep your eyes open. Um, and if you do find something, find out who the person is you should contact who owns the land, and let them know. Oftentimes, if you're working on like public land, like a park or something like that, find out who owns the land and let them know you found something. Because you could be at a playground and there's a hillside and you'll start finding stuff. I took my daughter to a playground in Denver once, and there's like a little hillside, and went up to it, and it's like there's some triceratops teeth coming out of here. So you can find really cool stuff. And a lot of North America has rocks that are of the Mesozoic age, where there is a possibility of finding dinosaur bones. And oftentimes it's in weird places you wouldn't necessarily think of being really, an important fossil bed. Um, but if you just keep your eyes to the ground, they'll start jumping out at you too. So yeah, yeah,
fantastic.
definitely keep searching.
That's fantastic. Is there anything you're working on at the moment, or anything you want to tell us about before we say goodbye?
Um, let's see this. I'm working on a couple projects. I'm One of the really fascinating things that I've been working in recently in the last few years has been the event that led to the beginning of the age of dinosaurs. So looking at the end Permian extinction event, which occurred about 252 million years ago, which kicked off the age of dinosaurs. Dinosaurs live in the Mesozoic era, so they start to arise during this period of time after this mass extinction during the Triassic. And the other thing that happens during the Triassic is there's this huge kind of experimentation with a lot of the diapsid and synapsid reptiles that were living at that time. And dinosaurs are just one of a bunch. But by the end of the Triassic, there's another big extinction, and that extinction kills off all the competition with the dinosaurs. So that by the beginning of the early Jurassic, the dinosaurs rose to dominance, and they started getting big and monstrous and super diverse. And the other animals, the little diapsid lizards and the mammals, they all kind of got really small and shrunk down. So one of the really fascinating things is what caused the end Permian extinction. And the other really fascinating thing I find really fascinating is the end Triassic extinction. So what was going on at those two periods of time? And one of the really fascinating things is from evidence that we've been gathering, both of those extinctions are probably related to volcanism that was happening, that was causing the climate to get really hot. So at the end of the Permian, there's a massive volcanic eruption in Siberia, and just called the Siberian Traps. And it's just a huge, big, huge, massive eruption. And at that time, the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere increased quite a bit. And that caused the climate to get really, really hot. And it killed off a lot of animals that were living in the oceans. It killed off a lot of animals living on the land because it got really, really hot. In the Triassic, in this new desert environment, uh, after this global warming event, is where the dinosaurs start to take off. And they start doing pretty well. But then there's another major global warming event at the end of the Triassic. And that one is caused by the Atlantic Ocean starting to split apart. And all of the volcanism along the Atlantic region that's going to separate North America and South America from Africa and Europe. And those eruptions cause another global warming event. So things get hotter again. And you get massive deserts that start to spread across the earth. So a lot of the beautiful sandstone deposits that are here in Utah that you see, many of those are deposited during the end Triassic and beginning of the Jurassic period. And one of the things that made dinosaurs so successful is they could live through these global warming events and live in the deserts. They have very upright stance. They could run. They were quick. They weren't like the other reptiles and mammals that kind of suffered during those extinctions. So during the Mesozoic period, during the lush period of the Jurassic and Cretaceous, and things kind of calmed down a little bit, you have the return of the forests. You have the return of and the beginnings of angiosperms, of flowering plants. And during that period of time, dinosaurs got big. They had food now. You get up to the point you get to the Cretaceous, things are warm and tropical and wet, and so you don't have to worry about those big massive deserts like that actually kicked off their evolution.
Sure.
So dinosaurs were really successful during that early period of global warming at the end of in the Triassic period and at the end of the Triassic, and that's what made them successful. And so I'm always kind of fascinated with those events in the geological time scale, because it kind of relates to some of the things that are happening today with global warming. So I'm interested in like how not only dinosaurs but other animals survive through those events, and what made them successful, and which were the animals that didn't make it through, that suffered. So that to me is really fascinating
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, it's just endless unanswered questions, isn't there? It's just like
There is.
you get
There
to one
is.
and think, well, with that happen, what happened to that? What happened to this? And what about that? And what about that? It's just like you say, if you're detective minded, if you're somebody who asks questions and looks for answers, it's a fantastic career. It really
Yeah.
is fantastic. Well, I wanted to say thank you so much for your time today. It's been inspiring. It's been interesting. I'm sure the kids are going to take a lot of it, a lot of stuff out of it. And I wanted to thank you so much. And I'm sure. Well, I'm sure. I'd love to have you back at some stage, and we can discuss other things that are going on, and perhaps narrow it down onto something smaller if you'd be willing. But it's very kind of you to have spent your time with us.
Oh, this is a lot of fun. This is a great setup, and it's just really fun to talk about dinosaurs with people who are interested in it, for sure. Yeah,
Good,
yeah.
good. And the guys, let me put your website up here so the guys can find your website here, benjamin-berger.org. Okay, it's .org, and that's where to find you. And you've got, I know, I was looking at some videos and stuff you've got up there. I think I was watching one. It may have even been on Twitter about Triceratops. And so for you guys watching, Benjamin spends a lot of time doing lots of stuff and lessons on there, all about dinosaurs and prehistoric life. So it's a great place to go and look.
Yeah, you can check me out on YouTube as well. So I have lots of videos on YouTube, and just search under Benjamin Berger, just Benjamin Berger dash science. So, but you can link off my website as well.
I
So
got you.
yeah, lots of cool stuff up there. Yeah,
All right.
for
Well, thank you
everybody.
so much for your time, and I'm sure we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you
Bye.
so much. Take care.